My name is Michelle Ring Hansen.
And my name's Joe Miller.
This segment of the training is an overview of the trials. You can access the materials referenced in this training with the participant resources document located in the Trials Mentor user group.
Process, the overview of UDL, and really how the trials are a foundation for work with other state priorities. The UDL implementation trials and UDL in general really allows us to make connections to 5 state priorities in Wisconsin. DPI has really embraced a continuous improvement process, and that process uses a Plan, Do, Study, Act. Our trial process is bringing that Plan, Do, Study, Act right to the classroom level. We also see a lot of support for educator effectiveness through the trial work. So your SLO and PPG alignment and that of the teams that you work with really can leverage the academic rubric and the Plan, Do, Study, Act cycles that are present in the trials process. Part of our trials work is really being good consumers of the data that we collect around student response and educator practices. And in the state of Wisconsin, we have something called WISE Explore. And our WISE Explore state team has developed a data inquiry process. We have found that process to be a really good foundation for the data collection and analysis that we use in the trials work. So we've built an analysis tool along with data collection tools to really help leverage inquiry versus just accessing and examining data, but taking it to the now what do we do and what decisions do we make because of the data. The work that we do with academic standards and observations of students when we apply UDL practices is really leveraging our state standards. And so we found that teams can really anchor their work in specific standards and use those standards to monitor student response to practices. And finally, we know we have state and federal accountability in Wisconsin. The UDL implementation trials work is a nice way to really look at how student groups, and generally we know that we have populations of students that are considered underserved, and how are those students responding to the UDL practices that we're deploying at the classroom level. So the work is a nice vehicle to really touch 5 priorities that are on the radar screen in our state, but also priorities that I'm sure are connected to the work you do in your districts as well.
So the purpose of the UDL implementation trials really is to build a collective efficacy around UDL practices through the use of PDSA cycles. And what we're doing is we're developing evidence of our effect as we experiment with professional practices. And together, we can build a collective effect on all the students that we have and serve in each of our practices. And this is a great way to do that together. So it's not pockets of excellence in a school, but we're changing systematically across all of the classrooms in a district eventually. So the process is actually quite simple, but as we go through it today, it might seem complex. But at its basis, it really is about 3 PDSA cycles over the course of a year. We start out with the baseline data collection where teachers who are studying their practice don't change what they're doing in their classroom. They may be already doing some parts of UDL, and that's great. Just don't add anything in, just, business as usual. And that happens at the beginning of the year as soon as we get our teams kicked off. And then as mentors, you will help your district or your school and your teams develop a process roadmap or a trials roadmap that sets aside those windows of time to go through each trial cycle. And each trial cycle consists of that Plan, Do, Study, Act. And it's really about planning on the lesson design or the instructional strategy that your team is going to try for a current trial cycle. Then putting that practice into place with students in the classroom, and then collecting evidence across 2 dimensions of students, the effect on students. And that includes the academic focus that the team will decide on, as well as an engagement measure, because we know students aren't learning if they're not engaged in the process of learning. And then finally, our teams come back together after they've collected that data to reflect on what they see as the outcomes, and also how that practice looked in their classrooms and how that affected their thinking process and serving all students. And the ACT part of that is we adopt that practice as a normal way of doing business. We adjust that practice, or perhaps it's a practice that wasn't working for the students that we have in our classrooms at this time, and we may decide to just move on to another practice. There is a much more detailed description of those baseline and trials available in a document that is also linked at the bottom of that slide. And this is available in the Mentors Toolkit as well. So you can share this with the folks that you mentor then. So as mentors, you're going to fill multiple roles, and we've named them planner, facilitator, advisor, data guide, and learning leader. And then as part of this project, you also are going to have a project partner role. So we wanted to bring this infographic to you to be able to understand a little bit of the role that you're going to play this year with the folks that you serve in your toolkit team or your trials team. This grant project and training is designed to help you lead and activate teams as they participate in those UDL implementation trials. And in our next slide, we're going to learn from folks that have been in the field about what each of these roles look like when they're working with teams. And we'd like you to have this document up as you listen to the voices from the field and look at the checkpoints under each of those roles. And those are the responsibilities within those. It's not an exhaustive list, but it's the big ideas. And as you listen to their voice, what sticks out to you? Well, all right, we'll kick off our voices from the field with Mia today. And Mia's going to be talking about the facilitator and learning leader roles. So Mia, welcome to the stage here.
Morning.
So Mia, when you were in the facilitator role, what did that role look like for you? Do you have a story of, what it might have been like for you?
So the district that I worked with the last 2 years is a very small rural district. They actually did not have an instructional coach on staff. So as the facilitator, it really was my my work to set up first, like what coaching meant, because a number of the folks that I had a chance to support had never been in a coaching relationship before. So that was a little bit of new territory for folks. So establishing some of those early relationships. So that was part of, I think, the toolkit that was like part 0.1. And just helping people kind of understand, like, this is a different relationship if they've never been in that role before.
Okay. And is there anything that you wish you would have known before you started with facilitating those teams?
So again, I think I was under a little bit of a false impression because of the size of the district being so small, and supporting the teachers in the trials process not clearly articulating with their like building level leadership about the work. So going forward, my counterpart in my region, Carrie Jo Bornberg, she and I kind of tag team this work in making sure that district leader or building level leaders and leadership teams have their own kind of ongoing learning about what UDL looks like. And they begin to talk about some systems change or even like some structures that need to happen in the coming years for this kind of PLC-esque support and conversation to take place. So that was one of the things I wish I would have known from the get-go, is including building level leadership in their own kind of learning along the way.
Okay. And then did you encounter any hurdles that you overcame and in that facilitator role, and how did you do that?
One that comes to mind, again, was in the same district, but it was in year 2. So year 1, I had like this amazing group of 4 teachers who were from different content areas. And again, being in a small district, they, for the most part, were singleton departments. So for them to have these really collaborative conversations was pretty powerful. In year 2, we doubled the size of the group. So we went from 4 folks to now a team of, is actually 9. And it was difficult for them to kind of keep that "this is my small team" conversation. And that initial cohort, my first 4, they felt like it was more powerful for them to meet in smaller groups to do the kind of debriefing that you read about and that you facilitate within the mentor toolkit. So the hurdle was, how to manage some of that growth when you're in, year 2, year 3, and beyond, to keep that sense of a PLC, but also some continuity around that shared learning across that entire process. So I would have kept them in smaller groups, but had them debrief as an entire group, maybe a couple times over the course of the year.
Oh, that's a good idea, Mia. Great. So Carrie Jo provided us with some written response, and I'll just read that out. So in her planner role, she says, "I was an external consultant who worked with a high school instructional coach. The trials process was new from both of us, for both of us, and my role as a planner was to read and process the information in order to facilitate, model, and plan some of the meetings and with team members who learned alongside, were participating. Overall, I was building capacity for others to engage in the work while I also learned alongside them. I planned meetings in advance and put them on the calendar every time we met. I learned this was a very important part of the journey as it held us accountable to the work and provided structure and guidance. I also co-facilitated team meetings and didn't solely provide new content around UDL, but also aimed to foster rich conversations around the student learning that was occurring." And then one major hurdle that she overcame and how she did that, she says, "As a planner, one hurdle I experienced was that the staff members I was working with already had a good foundation around universal design for learning. This wasn't a negative challenge as it made the discussions richer from the start. However, I had to really think about how to intentionally design some of the embedded professional development in a way that wasn't new to them, but also extended their learning. I did this by continuing to review learning around UDL in each trial, but always asked questions in advance that would allow me to see where the staff were at in terms of their background knowledge. They had worked on learning goals before, but we were still able to take this a step deeper. We also had a harder time with the engagement data and not having a specific rubric, and as a team created our own rubric for what the engagement of trial students should look like, sound like, and feel like." And she goes on to say what she wished she would have known before she started was to plan all meetings in advance right from the start. She says, "I always planned meeting to meeting. However, I think having some target points identified on the calendar right away would have created more overall structure to the work and made it easier to put aside time when everyone was very busy. I also think I could have done a better job as a planner describing the UDL trial process as a whole prior to launching the work. We're going to listen to Terry because she's going to tell us in just an audio recording about the advisor. So here's Terry.
Hey Terry, how you doing
Wanna-
today?
I'm doing great, Joe.
Great. Hey, we're wondering if you can tell us in the advisor role of being a UDL implementation trials mentor, what did that look like for you?
So sometimes I got a question about students being absent, and teachers would be wondering if, because a student was absent on a day that they were planning on taking data, if they would have to try to reteach the lesson or, make another lesson for those students in order to collect that data. And the answer to that is no. We cannot make this artificial, and it should be just if they're absent, and you might get another opportunity to take some additional data on that student, and if so, that's great. But if not, it just is what it is.
Okay.
There's one other area too that teachers often have questions about, and that usually happened after the baseline data had been completed. And so the baseline was over and teachers were in their first trial. And there's a recommended amount or number of criteria that is a good number to have for the trials, and that is to try to collect each criteria 4 times. So what would sometimes happen is that teachers would run out of time, there'd be changes to their lessons that were out of their control, just a whole host of things that happened. And often I was communicated with by teachers kind of panicked because they were like, I only have 3 criteria for these students and it says I need 4. And my answer has always been, it has to work for you. So you have 3, that's great. Take a look at your schedule, see if there's another opportunity that you might be able to even pick up a few more students with that collection. But if not, don't panic about it. It has to work for you. This should not cause you angst just to collect the data.
Thanks for that advice. Is there something that you wish you would have known before you started being a mentor to the UDL implementation trial teams?
I think one of the things that I wish I would have known about that advisor role is what I was going to be willing to say yes to and what I was going to say, no, you can't do it. You can't do that way. And really, after I went through the experience, I realized that there really wasn't anywhere I was going to tell people no, unless they absolutely had no data. In that case, you really didn't have a trial.
Yeah.
But anything else we could work with.
Okay, great. And then what's one major hurdle that you overcame in that mentor, either as a mentor or in that mentor role, and how did you do that?
One of the hurdles that I needed to overcome in that mentor role is I personally needed to spend just a little bit more time getting to know the criteria that some of the trial members were using, because they would come to me with questions and I found that I really couldn't answer their question unless I went back into their academic rubrics and really looked deeply at that. And I think making sure that the academic rubrics are well thought out by the individual participants would have been something that if I would have thought of prior to that, I would have made sure that the people in the roles, in the teams that were using their academic rubrics really understood those well. Because some of the things that I saw happening with that were the fault of really not thinking through, and that was on me.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Okay, before we go into the data guide role, I want to give us a time to pause and process here. Back. Just to let you know, we are recording again. And we're just going to ask for a takeaway from each of the rooms. So room 1, we had Amanda, and Beth. Is there anything that stuck out to you in the conversation you had in your room about the planner, facilitator, and or advisor role?
Well, we're coming in at different levels of experience. I mean, Sheboygan Falls has really been working within this framework for a long period of time. So I think my takeaway is that poor other Amanda is going to be getting a lot of contact from me about how those roles work, especially because our district is early in working this down to the elementary level.
Got it. Thanks, Amanda. Okay, room 2, that was Gina, Mark, Jake, and James, and Alyssa.
We just talked about the fact that we're at different spots as well. It was nice to hear from Jake that he's taking the pieces that he learned in Sheboygan Falls and taking them to his current district.
Nice. Thank you. I'm assuming you're Gina, not Mark, right?
That's correct.
Okay, great. All right. From room 3, we had Jeffrey, Jen, and Benny.
I think quick takeaways were we're grateful for the structure. We're also wondering about the reality in schools where boxes don't seem so set, right? And we end up blurring boxes quickly. So those were 2 pieces.
Yeah, and I just want to follow up with that, Jeffrey, because you can really lean on Terry's voice from the field. She's been really good at being the yes facilitator. You know, whatever problems our participants have, we try to be able to say, yes, we'll fix that. Yes, we're going to do it the way it works for you. So the boxes shouldn't be boxed in. They should be borders that help us understand, you know, that structure, but it's not to contain us in any way.
And my experience is the support from CISA has been great. However, we also know that picking up just the amount that we can actually handle rather than getting too much is part of this process, right? And it's going to be part of the learning.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Room 4, we had Carrie, Jo, and Christine.
I can talk, I guess. It's Kari, just to be.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kari.
But Kari, yep. So we talked a little bit with Eau Claire, just creating their own engagement rubric, or not necessarily creating, but like, what does it look like, sound like, feel like, and so teachers and staff had more ownership. I am brand new to this project. As I stated, I just started at CISA in July. So I said that just from personal experience, planning and facilitating, I feel like our strengths of mine, but I don't know how that will fit into this process exactly because I don't know exactly what it looks like. And then Carrie was new last year, so she said, it'll be okay, Kari, you'll figure it out after in this first year. So I said, thank you, because right now I'm jumping in and I really don't, I know the district I'm working with, and I actually live in that district, so that's exciting, but I don't know anything more than that. So
that's wonderful. Well, lean on us, all of us together as a network. We're going to support each other through this entire process to be able to learn what works best and what are the workarounds that we've discovered to be able to help our participants participate to the fullest extent. All right, room 5 was Lana, Leah, Megan, Angela, and Mia.
We talked about how I have experience with our school district, but then 2 of the other districts are brand new to everything and are starting at ground level. And we talked about how we'll support one another, and we're close enough that we could do some visits.
Oh, that's awesome. That sounds wonderful. All right. Room 6, Mike, Missy, and Wendy.
Mike said, and he said to trust the process. And he has a little bit of experience from last year, second semester, they did some trials, and he assured Wendy, who is new to the process as well, that the process works. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I was just reassuring her when I took over the trials process with my teachers that I was new to it. I felt like I didn't know what was going on, and I was just honest with them about it too. And I told them that we're all going to learn this together. And it really worked because the framework is really nice.
That's great. Thank you.
And I also want to say, like, historically speaking, just a shout out to Joe, who has taken a process that, for those of us who've been in the grant for a very long time, has taken a process that always felt like weird and not functional and not working, to something that is manageable and workable. And it feels really good to finally be at this place and to know that it's applicable to not just the UDL trials, but in all of those other places with educator effectiveness and other places you might do those plan, study, do, acts. This process it makes it all make sense. So it's been 8 years coming, but we're ready for it.
Thanks, Missy. And it can't go without saying that having Michelle as my partner in this, to be able to get it documented and organized in a way that's consumable, it's a long time coming, but it's really coming to fruition. So thank you for that. We'll come back to the voices from the field. We'll hear about the data guide role. And
Terry, in your role as a data guide for UDL implementation trial teams, what stories do you have for us? What did it look like for you?
So, Joe, one of the things that became apparent to me after the first run through with my first team was that teachers did not always feel either they had the skill set or had not had an opportunity to really have conversations about raw data. And I often needed to give them like scaffolding questions or even data sentence starters in order to kind of clarify, what it was that we were doing. And then, just because they're great educators, they were able to grasp that.
What do you wish you would have known before you started as a data guide?
One of the things I wish I would have known is that it would take so much time for many educators to really reflect as deeply as they were being asked to about the data and about the questions that were in the data analysis form. I guess because I was aware of it, it did not occur to me that for someone else looking at it the first time, that might be very time consuming to actually be able to process that information, as well as be able to write statements about data.
All right, and
what's one major hurdle you overcame and how?
One of the hurdles that I overcame was really taking the view of the educator in this process. Because I was the mentor, I knew the information and I knew what was coming next. However, it took me a while to realize that the participants and the teachers that were taking part in this trial process did not have that knowledge. And so what I started doing was previewing what was coming next for the educators. And that seemed to not only relieve some anxiety, but also it just made the rest of the trial process so much smoother.
Great. Thanks, Terry.
All right, we're lucky that Carrie Jo also prepared some information about being a data guide. So Carrie Jo, are you still with us?
Yeah.
Okay, would you share with us your experience as a data guide as well?
Sure. One of the things that I found the most helpful was that the data gave us really the evidence to support the student progress towards learning. Teachers that I had worked with were feeling a little overwhelmed at times or not really seeing some of the progress students were making specifically in engagement. The expectations were very high and they were thinking about all of the kids in their classroom. And when we took the time to really analyze the data that was student specific to the trials, we noticed that those students were making progress and that they were progressing in their learning, it just looked different, and that the teacher was maybe thinking too broader about the focus and being in all students. And she was just really able to see that, like, wow, this is working, and these little changes that I'm making to my instruction or having the student reflect more on their goal is having an impact, even if I didn't really see that in my initial perception. So that was just a really neat takeaway from the trial experience as a whole. One of the things that I wish I would have known with that is just really reassuring people that there's a human side to this work, and that things aren't always how they are laid out in a textbook or a manual or a toolkit, that there's going to be those growing pains along the way, and then sometimes those are how we learn the most. And just know that that's normal, and we're all working really, really hard, and it's ultimately about just making those small changes that impact kids, and eventually it does work, and we see that progress and that growth, but we really have to take that learning step by step.
That's great. Any major hurdles that you want to share with us, or should we move on to learning leader? I'll give you the choice there.
I think we can move on.
Okay, great. Well, Mia, we're looking forward to hearing about you as a learning leader with your implementation trial team.
So I think, again, our positions as CISA folks are a little bit unique, because the district that I've been talking about, I also was there for several other in-service days. I had folks that would come to workshops at our office, and I think one of the things that I was really intentional about was using UDL practices and just modeling UDL with every interaction that we could when working with those folks. And really, once you begin to see UDL, you can't unsee it, and it just becomes kind of a part of who you are. So I guess as a learning leader, for folks that are in districts, really living what you are kind of preaching, right? So helping people feel UDL and what that's like for them as learners.
That's great. Is there anything that you wish you would have known before you started, or a major hurdle that you overcame?
I guess one of the wishes in going back, and this is something that Mike and I from Anago talked about a little bit last year, was that during the planning sessions, actually having folks go to their curriculum maps and pull out where are they in their unit plans, and making that clear connection to what you as a district have identified as your learning goals, and all of that curriculum mapping work, that lives within this design process. So that was something that I wish I would have done, and I hadn't thought about that practice until I think Mike and I kind of started a little bit later in Anago.
That's a great connection, Mia. How about any hurdles and how you overcame those?
Again, being a weird CISA lady, we come into districts and then we leave. One of the hurdles was that message kind of sticking. So if you're an instructional coach and maybe you don't have the street cred of being in the classroom anymore, one of the most important pieces was the folks that were part of the trials process sharing what they were learning. And not me sharing it for them, but they literally had time at several staff meetings to talk about their kind of rethinking about PLCs and what that meant for them, what they had learned about engagement and how that is changing what they're doing in other classrooms. So if folks are comfortable, who are part of that trials process, being able to just share bits and pieces in small bites about what they're learning and how their practice as learning designers is changing.
That's great. Thank you. If anybody has a big takeaway from the idea of the data guide or learning leader, please share with us.
Good. I really like my little trifecta. We were just saying some of the hangups I'm having in my building with understanding the use of data as it not being a personal thing. This is how we measure.
Yeah. That is a hang up for sure. And we have to be there to support our participants as they grow through being able to understand it's not personal.
No. Oh, if anything, I would be happier if people took it personal in the way of, oh, I know I can do better.
I'll just pop in and say, we have people at all different places, and the beauty of UDL is that it accounts for the variability, and the variability among the people in this group with us today in terms of your readiness, your prior experience, your understanding of UDL, your implementation stage across your district is all variable. Everyone is in a different place, and that is okay. And even, your district might be in one place, and then you personally or the people you're going to coach are in a different place personally as well. But the documentation that supports this project will help meet people wherever they are. And the goal is to learn through the process together. And the data will help bring meaning to that learning process. So it really all ebbs and flows, but it's really important that you have permission to be exactly where you are. And you shouldn't have any connotative feelings about that. Just be where you are and learn and grow from right where you are. So
I just want to say thank you for all that. I mean, I agree with Missy's statement earlier about this feels a little more organic and not as regimented. So kudos to Joe and Michelle and anyone else that's been part of this work. But our group talked a little bit about both those roles, data guide and learning leader. And Alyssa and I were sharing that we feel like our district has all of those major components on that first slide where you have the PDSA, you've got the SLO, the educator effectiveness work. We're really going to tackle our essential standards in ELA this year. So we're feeling good about that area. The one area that I had questions about were like, what data do we use? And I love the 3 times for the year, Joe, because those align with our standardized assessments of, in our case, FastBridge. But the more honed in units, common formative assessments, Mark and Gina at Sheboygan Falls had shared that in the past they had teacher created rubrics that showed kids going from emerging to approaching to proficient or whatever. And then the teachers create those things. And then Alyssa had asked, what about the engagement piece to that? And some brilliant responses, I thought. Alyssa's a 5th grade teacher, and so you could survey the kids about their engagement. The other part that I thought was a great tip was you ask a learner strategist or instructional coach or even an administrator. I think you could ask to come in and do some observations of student engagement and just make some notes for that classroom teacher to review with their PLT during their common planning time to evaluate student engagement. So really good tips in this last breakout session. So thank you.
Oh, absolutely. And just to follow up on your idea of what data to collect and where to put it, later after the break, we're going to get into, what is the data tool that's part of this trials process that's been developed to be able to support that data collection and transformation. So that for those of you who are participating in our trial, the grant project, we ask you to use our tool so that we can collect data statewide and see the collective impact that we're all having together. But that won't prevent you from doing anything district specific in addition to that. So thank you so much for bringing that up. Any other comments about the data guide or learning leader roles?
I guess I will just add, a few years ago when I was working and mentoring one of our districts here in CESA 7, one of the things that wearing the data hat that I noticed across teams was teachers, after collecting the data, didn't really know what to do with it. So they had a lot of data, but they weren't always sure what the next step was. So when we built the analysis tool, it's giving them inquiry questions to really start some good dialogue around the data that they're collecting in the classroom. And I think, the inquiry process is as much about making sense of the data as it is about now what. And so for me, when I think about that data hat, collecting the data, having those common rubric indicators or criteria that are observable, that teachers are able to observe in their classroom and collect data around, is a wonderful foundation to see how educator practices are impacting both academic and engagement indicators. However, if we can't make sense of the data, it does create a roadblock or a barrier for us in the so what, now what. So I think one of the nice things about the implementation trials process, it gives starting points to have those rich inquiry questions. And oftentimes what we heard from the teams is talking about the data and problem solving together was something that they felt was a value add. It was a great opportunity for them to come together around some common data components that were living in their classroom.
Yeah, thanks for that, Michelle. The one role that we haven't gone over yet is project partner. And as a project partner, there are some commitments that we are asking you to agree to be part of our grant project. And as a partner, you're asked to attend all training sessions and network meetings. Those are listed at the bottom of our introduction to the UDL Implementation Trials grant. You'll also be asked to plan and facilitate the UDL Implementation Trials process with teams using the UDL Implementation Trial Mentor Toolkit. So some of you also have a CISA person who's supporting that work with you. So you'll partner with them to be able to participate in that planning, advising, to build your own skill. One of our ultimate goals is to really make this an internal to district process, that the implementation trial mentor toolkit can stand on its own, and that any district could pick this up and be able to start using implementation trials within their own district without the need for an outside consultant to come and support that work if the capacity exists within the district. As a project partner, you also will be ensuring that teachers on the team include individuals with IEPs in their roster of students to observe. You will help record the school, and you will record the school and district participant and student counts for us to be able to collect data on how many educators and students we are impacting with our grant project. And that's de-identified information so that we just are getting a count. You will complete the mentor survey yourself and administer an educator survey to your team members. You will have the opportunity to use the Learn, Do, Reflect journal to document your mentoring role reflections. And that's not a requirement, but we ask you to provide us some feedback, and that Learn, Do, Reflect journal is an easy way for us to get a window into your thinking during this, using the mentor toolkit. And then finally, supporting your district in completing the project partner agreement documents that are listed, that are linked right here. And so when I go into that, what I want to show you is that there is a project partner agreement that you will download, and it's a PDF with 2 pages. And it allows us to use any information that you provide to us, any audio or video of the work that you do with districts that you choose to share with us, but also the video and audio that we collect here in our meetings to be used to further the work of the UDL Implementation Trials Mentor Toolkit and Grant Project. And then finally, the district data sharing agreement just allows districts to release the data, the de-identified and consolidated data to us, so that we can use that in our reporting to the state, as well as to be able to share in that consolidated manner, never district specific, with others to be able to gather motivation for them to be able to inspire them to pick up the mentor toolkit. So the data by district, the DPI will see districts, but nobody else will be able to see district information. we're happy to turn your participant surveys and that data back to you so that you can also see the impact that you're having on teacher mindset, as well as their growth in being able to serve all students. So we put together, excuse me, this mentor planner because the three big buckets of work that you're going to be doing is this mentor group activities as a project partner, and the August through May ideas are there, the dates for our meetings are there, and we'll show you how to RSVP to the events within the UDL Forward community later in the today's work. And then with your implementation team, you're going to be doing some work before the baseline. You're going to be doing some work before each reflection time that you have with teachers in that PDSA cycle. You'll have a set of things that you do before each trial, and then you'll have a set of things to do before each trial reflection. And then finally, as a mentor, you work with a leadership team within your school to be able to plan how teachers in the school gave the message to the rest of the folks in the school about how the implementation trials were working for that team. So working with the leadership team, or perhaps you're the leadership team, making space for that voice to be heard, making planning forward for making sure calendars are set, making sure teacher teams have the resources and the time that they need to be able to do all of their work. So leadership team meetings are included as part of the mentor toolkit framework that you can use in a way that works best for you and the district that you serve. And then finally, we talked about in the commitments that you would be providing counts of teachers and users. So this participation log is the place for you to be able to collect that information. And the mentor, you complete this log about each team and updates after each data collection window. So to begin with, before you even start your baseline data collection, we need some information about you as the team mentor, the district that you're serving, the school that will be doing the trials, the team names that you develop with the teams that you're working with. And for each teacher, we need a separate row because that teacher name will be there, what kind of teacher they are, and then the number of ELL students in their observation class, the number of students with IEPs in their observation class, and the number of students without IEPs in the observation class. And then we'll define what indicator students means later, but you'll have number of indicator students that are ELL, number of indicator students with IEPs, and number of students who are indicator students who do not have an IEP. That number will probably stay the same throughout the trials for each of your teachers, so it will be just a copy and paste. But in the event that students move out of a teacher's class, then those numbers may be adjusted. And we ask you to keep those updated over the course of the year and the trial. And then finally, the two surveys that we're asking you to work with us on is the Educator Practice and Student Learning Survey, which is a survey that you will administer to the UDL implementation trial team members at the reflection meetings following the baseline and all of the trial collection windows. And then you will also be taking a survey, and that will be after each of our trainings and network meetings. We'll ask you to take this survey, and that helps us see how we're serving you as well as the growth in your, excuse me, feeling about being a mentor. Excuse me again. Any questions about the counts or the surveys that I can answer for anybody now?
Just so you have some context on our work and the tools that we're bringing to you today, along with the process and the toolkit, are all grant funded. And because of the funding, we are expected and asked to make sure that certain groups of students have access to the practices and the supports that reach the classroom. So part of our work is to collect data around the trials teams and the participants so that we can be assured that we're reaching student groups as well, and particularly students with disabilities or students that have IEPs, as well as educators that serve those students.
On to the Learn, Do, Reflect journal. So if you haven't already, go ahead and in your participation guide or participant guide, open up the Learn, Do, Reflect journal, and I will give you a quick tour of the Learn, Do, Reflect journal. It's going to make a copy for you, so you can rename that anytime you want to. And once you get in there, you'll see the first page is a table of contents, and each of the table of contents items are clickable and will bring you down to where we have a space for you to collect your learnings. Any to-dos, you can create a to-do list there in that second field on that first row. We've put some reflection prompts in there to inspire any notes that you might make. And so you can collect your thoughts into this journal at any time. I did create the second dates kind of area for us when we meet on October 11th. And then also during each of the stages and steps of the UDL implementation trials process, we've made a space for you there. When we come together in November, December, January, you'll need to make your own space to make notes if this works for you by just copying and pasting. Copy and pasting. And then just renaming this to November. And when I do that, I can come back up to the automatic table of contents, click on the refresh button, and it'll automatically put that link in there for me in the table of contents. So if you have questions about the technicalities of using that in the way that I've just provided to you, just let me know. Otherwise, use it however it works for you. And then if you are willing to share it back with us, we're always happy to have an insight into your thoughts as you go through this process.